Welcome back, everyone, to day 2, session 3 of the EGW Utility Solutions Conference. We know how valuable everyone's time is, and we appreciate the fact that you've chosen to spend your time with us this afternoon. The title of this session is The Perfect Storm, the 2021 polyethylene shortage and how we got here. Joining us today to talk about this topic is Mark Dignzaio and Logan Bridges with United Poly Systems. We'd really like to thank you guys for taking some of your time to share your insights with us. Before I get going way down the road, I just want to make everyone aware that we are recording these sessions and we'll be making the videos available for view on YouTube on our channel in the next few days. As everyone's probably aware at this point, we're giving away a door prize in each of the sessions of the Utility Solutions Conference. The door prizes have been sponsored, and we'd like to thank all of our sponsors for the contributions that benefit these sessions and for the overall support of this week's event. This session's door prize is being sponsored by EGW and will be $100 worth of Bass Pro Shops gift cards. That drawing will be held directly following this session, and you will be contacted if your name is drawn. Good luck. Here in just a minute, I'll properly introduce Mark and Logan. But first, I want to go over a few of the ground rules for the session. Most everyone is probably already aware of these at this point, but here we go anyway. We're bringing this conference to you via Microsoft Teams live events. For those of you who are familiar with Microsoft Teams or Google or Zoom, you may see some similarities to the virtual meeting rooms that we're all used to, but you'll also see some differences as well. Live events works like a live stream. We can see the attendees if your screen name is listed under your name, but we cannot actually see your faces. And then number two, you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. If you try to talk, we won't know about it. There's no need to mute your mic because there is no mic to mute in this format. However, you can interact with us via the live chat function. You'll notice a little chat icon at the top of your screen. It's a little comment bubble with a question mark in the middle of it. If you click on that, it'll open a Q&A chat box, and that'll allow you to submit questions. As questions come up throughout the session, we would encourage you to submit those using that function. I will be responsible for collecting the questions as they're submitted and then relaying them on to our presenters as we transition into the Q&A portion. You don't have to worry about interrupting the presentation using that chat, so feel free to submit your question as they arise, because I'll be responsible for handling them once they get here. Okay, that's it for the ground rules. This time, let's go ahead and introduce our panel. First off, we have Mark Dignzaio. He is United Poly Systems Vice President of Sales. Mark manages the day-to-day and strategic sales efforts of the company's products and services. With over 25 years of experience in sales and sales leadership, Mark has spent the last 15 years as the National Sales Manager and Vice President of Sales for NDOT Industries, a manufacturer of HDPE conduit and pressure pipe products. Next, we have Logan Bridges. Logan is the Vice President of Marketing Strategy and Commercial Operations of United Poly Systems. In his position, Logan utilizes his years of high-density polyethylene pipe sales and management experience to enhance the company's brand, product, and market development, inbound lead generation, and long-term marketing strategies. As the commercial operations leader, Logan provides a focus on pricing and spread management while improving the overall customer service experience. So now, without further ado, I will hand it off to Logan, and Logan and Mark can take it from here. Guys, it's yours.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks again to everyone for joining. We're going to cover some topics today. This topic is certainly one that we have gotten questions about more than any other, I'd say, in the past year. It's been every day, every week, every month. What's going on with material supply, pricing, and hopefully we can shed some light on a lot of the issues that have come up over the past year plus. We'll walk through material supply chain, Then we'll step into the pipe manufacturing overview, and then we'll cover all the things that have happened from supply shortage, exports, the pandemic issues that drain supply, and the cold snap that many of you are likely familiar with, and an additional demand spike that still continues today. And finally, we'll touch on what we can do in the future to help alleviate this issue and what we can do to prevent issues like this from stacking up again. And I'll hand it over to Mark now to walk through the raw material supply chain.
Thank you, Logan, and thank you for everybody for joining us. And again, as Logan said, before we get into what's actually taking place now in the market and the supply chain, we want to just show you what it takes to actually make polyethylene. And it's made in two ways, either via natural gas, as it is here in the United States, or via oil as the base product as it's used in other parts of the world. From the gas fields, it heads onto the fractionation plant where the hydrocarbons are separated. From there onto the ethylene crackers, where under heat it cracks the molecular bonds of the product of the ethane, onto the NAO production plant where the actual polyethylene pellets are actually made, and the grade of polyethylene that is being made is done at that point, onto the storage silos, at which time it's then loaded onto tanker trucks or rail cars off to the customer plants, either pipe extruders or injection molders of any kind. And as you could see at the end of the line, polyethylene is just not pipe. It's milk cartons, it's other consumables, gas cans. It's used in every industry that you could think of. And plastics are not only polyethylene, it's PVC, ABS, polypropylene. So anything coming out of this model can make a varying kind of plastics products. So what we wanted to basically say here is polyethylene is not only affected by its pipe use, but it's also the other consumables that is used in the polyethylene world. Next slide. Polyethylene resin manufacturers, there are a lot of them here in the United States, but there's only a few of them that actually make gas resin that's being used today in the marketplace. Dow Chemical, which makes both a medium and high density bimodal product. LyondellBasell, which makes a high density gas resin. Chevron Phillips or CP Chem, again, they make a high density bimodal and a unimodal medium density resin. INEOS makes a high density polyethylene used in the gas industry, which is also a bimodal product. And Formosa, which makes a unimodal medium density product. So although there are a few of them, there's not a lot to choose from. So it does put a big strain on the market, as in the conditions that we have right now. And I believe we're going to go back to Logan at this point.
Great. Thanks, Mark. So here we've got an overview of the actual HDPE pipe production process. Goes the same for medium density polyethylene production as well. At stage one, we're bringing in raw materials. So of course, the raw material delay is the first line that affects our production process. But as we'll see, logistical issues bringing in raw materials have been one form of delay, supply constraint that's affected people getting raw materials as well. And that starts at stage one here and stage 12 on the back end when we're looking to dispatch trucks to the job sites. At stage two, we're batching, we're adding additional components, color additives to the polyethylene. And these are also facing supply issues. Much of the additive is manufactured with the same base raw material, so that leads to constraints on that end as well. And further down the line at the print station, you see it's basically every commodity. So the print station is requiring ink for the print ribbon or for inkjet printing, and bundling at the storage and coiling location, stages 10 and 11. Those commodities are facing supply constraints as well. So almost every stage of our HDPE production process is currently facing some form of supply constraint or demand surge that has affected us over the past year. So what we'd like to get across is it's not just material, and it's not just the Texas cold snap as well, which has been primarily, I would say that's where the exclamation point in all of this kind of jumped out in front of everybody. So it definitely affected things, but we'd like to present to everybody here that it wasn't just that, though that did have a major impact. We had issues prior to the Texas cold snap. There was an uptick in return in demand as early as June 2020, building up the infrastructure that was really required during the pandemic times to boost infrastructure for not only water, gas, but also telecommunications and electrical infrastructure, which requires polyethylene as well. And then a large percentage of the supply has been exported numerous times, because at the very beginning of the pandemic, the raw material suppliers and manufacturers were unsure how much demand was going to be affected. So a large percentage was sent to China as they restarted a little sooner than we did here in the United States, because they got affected sooner. And then there was trade disputes amongst Mexico and South America, which led to a large purchase and export of material supply in Q4 of 2020. And as Mark mentioned, we are competing against consumables, the packaging, milk jugs, everything everyone's getting at the grocery store in higher demand than they have in the past, because everyone's been stuck at home for so long. That continues to eat into our remaining supply. And we do have a video coming up where we'll get into more detail about this if you've got questions regarding the specifics. But Mark's going to walk through the Texas cold snap and all the stages of how that affected everyone on this call and everyone across the industry itself. So.
As Logan said, the strain on polyethylene began in 2020, but it really didn't come to light until February of 2021 with really the perfect storm. Some could say 500,000-year storm in some cases, with the Texas cold snap lasting over about a week of sub-zero temperatures and record cold that really just took the nation to a standstill. And you all have a vision of a chemical plant. You see a lot of pipes, a lot of different feed lines going in. Every one of those were affected in many, many different ways. It wasn't just the feedstocks of polyethylene getting the natural gas and cracking the ethylene crackers, et cetera. The electrical grids were down. The municipal water supplies that feed the plants were down. And not only to the plants, but also to the people who work at the plants. As the weather started to break, you had a rush of demand on commercial contractors from all over the country going into the south central part of the United States, trying to get the infrastructure back up online. But they weren't just focused on the chemical plants. Again, they were focused on residential housing, other commercial buildings, municipal infrastructure, et cetera. So a polyethylene plant or a chemical plant of this nature, you just don't flick a switch and bring it back on. It takes some time. Then on top of that, you have the material supply constraints, because many of the materials that needed to bring the infrastructure back up and running used plastic products. And again, they were disrupted from the Texas cold snap and all the precursors that happened prior to that. Then on top of that, once you get running, you still had rail lines, switches, the grid within the trucking and rail transportation pipeline to get the products back to the field. There was such a demand on bringing products into Texas and into the south central part of the United States that getting product out was very difficult. So that also contributed to a delay. And then basically what these chemical manufacturers did, and in the case of many, many different industries that were affected, they put Band-Aids on the problem, and just to get back up and running. These plants are very, very volatile. As you know, you hear explosions around the Houston ports, the Louisiana ports from a chemical fire, because the materials do build up. They are very volatile, and they are subject to a catastrophic failure. So we are at a point now where those temporary repairs are under review and being audited and examined to determine whether or not a more permanent repair is needed to maintain the capacity that they're at, the reduced capacity they're at this point in time. And once you take, as we saw a couple slides ago, once you take one of those manufacturers or resin producers out of the mix, it puts such a strain on the other suppliers. And with our industry of the gas, there is a very limited supply of manufacturers making certified gas resin that is used in your systems now. So just imagine if one of those are out, the strain in the industry just exasperates from there. So those are some of the issues that the unprecedented cold in Texas and the Louisiana Gulf Coast really had an impact on our entire country, and we're still feeling those effects today. And I'm going to switch it back to Logan at this point.
Thanks, Mark. I think Mark mentioned a really key point there. The number of suppliers is so limited. They're making a lot of capacity, but if one of them goes down, there's about 5, so that's 20% of the capacity that is lost. And about 85% of the capacity to produce this resin is housed within that Gulf Coast area, Texas, Louisiana, right down there where the cold snap happened, where weather tends to affect production capabilities. So because of that, if there's damage to supply, it usually affects the resin suppliers across the board. And if one goes down, like Mark said, that really puts a lot of strain on the others. And as a result, all manufacturers of polyethylene pipe go under allocation and receive force majeure letters, which we all have at this point and have been under for months now. So to hopefully give a little more clarity, we have a third-party presenter, a third-party resource with RTI Global. It's resin tracking indices. They measure polyethylene. That's the one that Mike Burns, our guest video presenter here, is specialized in for a very long time, over 30 years in the plastics industry. He's worked with resin before at H. Muhlstein, 3 years in extrusion, and he's worked not only in polyethylene, but polypropylene, polystyrene, and recycled materials. He's very much an expert in the polyethylene resin market, manages over 4 billion pounds of PE transactions for his 40 RTI clients. And he helps gather analytics and data for information on material supply and pricing. So he's the perfect person to help us relay more of the information. This would be the gentleman that we would go to get information like we've presented, and we've been conversing with him, of course, over the past number of months. So we'll go to a video slide here where we'll be able to play this information from Mike Burns.
Logan, did you share your sound whenever we've had some issues with that on a couple of other presentations.
Sure, let me see here.
You may need to unshare and then reshare that presentation it'll give you an option to share the sound on your computer.
Sure thing.
But you have to select that share the sound before you actually send it.
There we go. Apologies, everybody. I think I've got that working now. I'll resume that video from Mike Burns.
With Resin Technology Inc., RTI. I've been in the plastics industry for 30 years now, and I've spent the last 20 years working with clients to help them get best-in-class pricing, make decisions based on information in the industry, and strategies to keep them at best-in-class pricing and working with the challenges in the industry. What I'd like to talk about today is how we got here today, and it's important to go back to what happened with March of 2020. As people don't want to review last year, this is when it started. And what happened in March of 2020, when the U.S. began to shut down the economies, people didn't know what to expect. Businesses were shut down. People were sent home from work. Plants stopped running at full capacities, and everybody went out to the store at the same time and purchased as much as they could, whether it was toilet paper, vinegar, cleaning supplies. But then what happened was the U.S. resin suppliers at the same time didn't know what to expect as inventory started to grow, as manufacturing plants shut down. The net result was the U.S. manufacturers, North American manufacturers, resin, took everything that they had and sent it over to China, specifically China, because China at the time had started restarting already, and their demand was picking up. So everything goes on a boat, goes to China. Well, then what happens? Everyone's home. They realize that Home Depot is now an essential business, that Target and Walmart are essential businesses. You go there and buy things to work on your outside, things you could buy a grill, you could buy, plants and stuff like that. So the economy in April and May starts to pick up. Unfortunately, the U.S. manufacturers were shut down for 5 or 6 weeks. All the resin was gone, and now the shelves are being emptied at our stores, and the demand is out of control. And people are buying everything they can. They're staying at home. They're not traveling, and they can do things at home. All the grocery stores, everybody on this call participated in it. You went and bought extra. You went out to stores, you bought things and did home projects you weren't normally planning on doing. You didn't travel. You had extra money. So all our inventory is gone. Production ramps up. U.S. demand comes in. There's no resin. Prices, June, July, August, and September, 4 months in a row, 19 cents up. That's historic. It's never happened like that, and it's never happened in the summer. So here we are, 19 cents up due to the COVID demand and the lack of resin. So if you look over the graph on the right, you'll see that as April through August, where our demand was strong, our inventories were getting drawn. Well, September got a little normal. Everybody was trying to calm down. We thought things were getting better in the COVID world. And it took 3 months to build 1 billion pounds of resin. And that billion pounds was getting us back. So people started negotiating for 2021 with the anticipation of a very soft resin market in 2021 based on what happened in 2020. So we're looking for price decreases in this month. So what happens in December and January is the big box. They don't want empty shelves on the in March when people come out of the houses and start doing home projects again. So they're placing orders. It's a pre-stocking demand, December, January, and even into February. The first week of December, the Braskem Idesa plant, it gets cut off from the Mexican government from their feedstocks, and they cannot make any resin. What happens is Latin America and Mexico run to the United States in January and buy all the resin that they can, and North American supplies them because we just built 1 billion pounds. So there's an inventory draw, there's very strong demand, and you have the big box buying. Now, February, historic freeze in Texas, everything is shut down. Every part of the plastic byproducts starts from natural gas. Everything has moisture in it. Natural gas goes to an ethane station. Ethane's cracked, goes to an ethylene station. Ethylene's made, goes to a polyethylene station. Every one of this has pipes involved, valves involved, stations involved, and water involved. So you just don't turn it on at the day after it warms up. You have to test things and find things. Valves are broken. The custodian that you have in your building does not fix that valve. You need nitrogen to clean out the lines. Everybody needed nitrogen at the same day. So it was a very big challenge. Net result, over 1 billion pounds drawn in that during that storm. And we're right back to where we were at the low number back at the end of August, September 2020. Now we have every plant down with a lot of uncertainties, and the demand in the U.S. is, again, as busy as it's ever been. Everybody is running 24/7. They can't make enough. And even with the prices that are going through, people are buying the resin or the products. So what we had this year, so at the end of last year, we had another 5 cents for a total of 24 cents of increases in 2020. Historically, prices go up 3 cents, come down 4 cents, 1 or 2 cents plus or minus every year. We had 24 in 20. We had 5,777 this year. That's 26 cents this year already, and 5 on the table in May, which is most likely, very much likely going to happen, and see another increase. Why is it going to happen? So you see that April improvement there? That's nice. We were looking for that and hoping for that. We need 3 months of unlimited, of undisrupted production to gain 1 billion pounds. And that's what we need to get back into this. Well, first week in May, last week, 3 major plants went down. Nova in Canada, Dow in Texas, and Braskem again in Mexico. All of these are drawn inventories. Today's inventory has been again reduced. There's limited availability, and business is very strong. Suppliers have a very good pricing position. The customers are paying the prices now, and that's why we're going to see inflation going forward. I mean, you've heard about this already coming from Wall Street, but prices have doubled in 2 years, so people have to raise the price and pass it on. It's very challenging. It's very challenging for processors to get their credit lines essentially doubled to meet their normal demand, and demand is better than that. So we're heading into the summer. I believe it's going to be another wave of some type of COVID demand, meaning people are going to travel, people are going to go to soccer games and sporting events. They may not do as much traveling as they've done in the past, but that money will be spent now at a restaurant or putting in some new things on your deck or something like that. So it's not over. We've got 90 days of recovery that we need. Unfortunately, in the middle of that 90 days is September. September is the hurricane season. So we've got a big hurdle to get through on the weather, at the same time trying to recover U.S. demand or U.S. production. So the outlook going forward in 2022 is going to be difficult to get these prices down to where you think they should be. U.S. suppliers are very disciplined. They're not going to give 10 cents back at a time. It's going to be 2s and 3s. And the resin supply will have to greatly exceed the demand. So we got one more slide I just want to show you. This is something I'm tracking. If you want to look at the last slide here, really just going back, this is 2019 are the average. Those are the dots going across. 2019 was a great year. All the new production was in. We had no hurricanes, average exports. So we had strong demand all the way through the year last year. You see the exports, the gray line at the bottom starts to taper off and continues to taper off into April because there's no resin to export. But you do see February, March, and April production levels improved. So we need to keep that blue line over the 2019 average for the next 3 months. Now, we've already had a hit in May, so this might start in June, July, August. 90 days without a disruption in polyethylene will be historic in itself. So it's going to be a big challenge. The export pricing, we won't need them until we have more resin than we can use here. And right now, we don't have enough resin. So in conclusion, that we're looking, do we really have to recover here? It's going to take probably through the end of this year before we can start even looking at discussing what is going to happen for next year for as far as pricing levels, and just be hopeful that there's nothing else that's in front of us. So, Resin Technology Inc., RTI.
All right. Very much appreciate Mike doing that. He is contracted with RTI to cover the whole polyethylene industry, as we mentioned. So if questions come up that we might not be able to answer, we can always go back to Mike. Our goal with this is to cover every possible question, certainly here or after, to make sure everybody gets everything that they're looking for out of this presentation. Mark, would you like to walk through some present, future outlook expectations?
Sure, Logan, and thanks. As Mike said, we need 90 days of continuous production at 100%. And he had mentioned a few setbacks already in the early part of May. Well, we just recently had one again last week, and that was due to the tropical wave weather that has been affecting the Texas and Louisiana coastline, and it knocked out power to one of the limited suppliers that are in the gas world of making polyethylene gas resin. It knocked out 4 separate reactors. So again, that 90-day clock starts ticking. So resin will still be in tight supply through the summer months. We've already received increased letters for June from the suppliers. So, you know, that is now 6 straight months in 2021 on top of what happened in 2020. We are seeing a rising cost in oil prices, and that will, even though, you know, Mike feels due to our reduced capacity in polyethylene, that will still drive some of the export business to the United States, because as I said, that polyethylene in outside the country is an oil-based product. And we're seeing elevated demand across the board in building supply products, in polyethylene itself, or polyethylene pipe in municipal and our utility gas products, as well as our conduits. So polyethylene as a overall is in very, very high demand. We have reduced supply. So, you know, I have to mirror Mike Burns's comments that we will see elevated pricing for quite some time. The clock of that 90-day window has just restarted again with the reactors that were knocked out last week coming back online, and that's followed up with the June increase. So back to Logan, please.
All right. So what can we do? There's a few things we can do. We're obviously not the raw material manufacturer. There are certain steps that we can take as the polyethylene pipe manufacturer, and there's steps that we believe the industry could take. On the non-pressure conduit side, there is the ability to use recycled or recycled material that we have to grind up because it's out of spec or it's a color transition, something like that. So we have the ability to reintroduce that material back into the process. Maximizing that consumption will allow us to utilize more, less, conduit material for production, and that frees up our ability to be allocated more medium density or high density pressure material, which then we can use for the gas industry. So we're very hopeful that that is that's a step we've taken. We hope that the industry as a whole has taken that approach, because we need to free up additional supply for increasing pressure market demand. there's definitely an opportunity to broaden specifications and requirements for not only materials, but the suppliers and the actual manufacturers. If a spec is hard spec'd to require one manufacturer or one resin supplier, as we've seen throughout, one supplier could go offline, and that's a 20% hit to the market. That will very much affect the supply capabilities of all the suppliers. So if one of those 5 pipe resin makers is shut down, that means that material does not end up going into that market. So having availability from more than one of the 5 resin suppliers, or multiple manufacturers or suppliers, that of course we'd love it for it to be us, EGW, but I think most importantly, we're at a position in the industry right now where supply is seriously constrained, and this isn't good for anyone, frankly. So we want you all to be able to get the material that you need to complete your projects, even if it's not with us. So we very much would like specifications to be broadened. I think that would help everyone. The gas market, however, is in a better position than other fluid handling markets. The water markets are relying on these legacy commodity products like cast iron, steel. We, on the non-pressure side, are putting pipe on metal reels, steel reels. That commodity has essentially doubled in price over the last year as well. So it's affecting those commodities. It's also affecting PVC, which is actually seems to be facing tighter constraints on supply, and because of that, of course, increased cost beyond what we've seen. So we're in a better position, believe it or not, than other fluid handling markets, and we certainly feel it's almost ironic, but if this infrastructure had previously been put in place in Texas or across the country where weather is generally affecting and causing these shutdowns, if polyethylene were being used, we would be in a better position because it's less prone to damage or breaks due to weather conditions. It handles freezing better, certainly, and it's seismologically it's better than other competitive products. So commitments to specific materials just further limit the availability in these high demand situations. So having exclusivity to a resin supplier ties the hands of the utility itself. So that's the message we're hoping to get across. Mark, do you have other points I didn't touch on there?
Sure, Logan. I just want to follow up on your broadening the specifications. As Logan said, if one supplier goes down, it takes 20% of the availability of the product to the market. It's actually smaller than that when you look at the medium density, because they're not as many resin manufacturers producing medium density. And in fact, when it comes to a bimodal medium density, there's only one. So we do ask the utilities to look at their specifications, potentially broadening their approvals, and in doing so, looking at the manufacturers, qualified manufacturers, and again, looking at the availability of qualified manufacturers that service many pressure markets, including the gas market, that are there, much like ourselves and others. So if there is a failure or a catastrophic failure or other issues that are plaguing the market, as in some cases they are today with a manufacturer, there are other alternatives. So the combination of looking at your material specifications, looking at your resin availability, and the pipe extrusion manufacturers itself, and possibly potentially broadening them, having alternatives, I think would be a key to help you, the utility, or municipal utility or public utility, get through these trying times. And as Logan did say, we are in better shape than the legacy municipal waterworks markets that, like you said, use ductile steel, copper, et cetera, which the raw materials are just exploding through the roof. So that is a good position where we are in the gas world, but we do feel, again, the key for the gas utilities or municipal utilities that are using the gas, or the end users using gas, would be to, again, to consider your materials that you do approve, your manufacturer potentially broadening that specification of manufacturers to allow yourselves more flexibility in trying times.
Well said. Well said.
Logan, if
so are we ready to, from here, do we transition into question and answer, or?
Looks like it, yes, sir.
Okay, great. Well, I do have some questions for you guys, some pretty good questions, actually. So we'll start off with the first one. How long do you think the shortage will last, and when will production be increased?
That is a good question. Production capacity is increased currently. It is really just, as we've kind of walked through, the limiting factors will be if capacity is taken offline outside of the control of the raw material suppliers, that hinders the ability to get back up to, as Mike Burns said, the benchmark that we need to be at to supply and have surplus for surplus demand. So it needs to be that 90 days of uninterrupted production. The clock is going to have to start, as Mark also said, next month. So hopefully by September, we'll be getting pretty close. That being said, as Mike also mentioned, that is hurricane season. And again, the majority of the resin suppliers are in the Gulf. So that is kind of a scary time for them. So hopefully they truly need to get back up to full capacity prior to that time, in the event that there are any tropical storms or hurricanes coming through that cause them issues in production. Yeah,
and those storms always are kind of a crapshoot, seems like, lately. Fantastic. Okay, got another one. Do you see resin prices eventually getting back somewhere close to where they were before all of this occurred?
That's a great question. As Mike mentioned, I am keeping track of our material cost and our material price to the market. This has been one. This is truly unprecedented. It's the craziest it's ever been, without question. So it really would require rapid deceleration and decreasing cost from the resin manufacturers. And I think it was Mike mentioned that they're, I'm not sure how he put it, they're a little bit more controlled than that. They don't tend to give out 10-cent decreases. They give out 10-cent increases if they have to, but they walk back slower. Us as the manufacturer are a little bit more tied to the whims of the market. So we feel the effects of those increases more rapidly, I would say, than even the end market does. We find out about material cost increases. We have confirmed cost increases for, say, this month, for May. We will find out about those in the first week of next month. So that is a difficult position to be in, but that's the way our industry works. So we are typically trying to play catch up, and it's usually not an issue because we have plus or minus 1 or 2 cents a year. So to have 40, 50 plus within the span of less than that, it really has strained all of the resin, or the pipe manufacturers, excuse me. So it's going to take a while, certainly, if it gets back to that point ever. It may be that it's back there in a number of years, but I certainly don't expect in the next year or so that we're back to the pre-pandemic, pre-export levels that we're used to. Mark, would you agree with that?
I totally agree. I totally agree, Logan. You know, as Mike did say, and you reiterated that the resin manufacturers are quick to come down and slow to give back, quick to go up and slow to give back.
Yeah.
On top of that, we're in a period of a boom, an economic boom, as the economy begins to recover, as you know, the country is putting COVID behind us. We're seeing raw materials being absorbed in many industries, housing, consumables, et cetera, across the board. And I think, you know, as we've all stated, we're eager to spend a little money here. So that will continue to drive demand. And if demand's high, pricing will remain elevated. And as we've looked at some trends over the next couple of months and what we've already seen, we do not see the pricing falling within the next quarter. Again, the clock is just restarting with the shutdowns that we had with the reactors, multiple reactors going down last week. So again, we need that 90 days of continuous full out production, and we're at a time when, you know, the tropical storm season is hitting, and again, you know, all it needs is a strong wave in the Gulf, and that could obviously send the market back into a very confused period. And the last thing we don't want is, at this point, is any interruption in supply. But for the next quarter, I think we'll continue to see elevated pricing without any relaxing, possibly another increase on top of the June increase that we've already seen. And then hopefully we'll start to see things start to settle off. But with supply and demand in all markets that utilize plastics up and will remain up for quite some time, an immediate relief is not in the horizon.
Okay. I'll pitch this next question up for whichever one of you guys wants to swing at it. What percentage of polyethylene pipe installed annually in the U.S. is actually manufactured in the U.S.?
I'll let Logan. He has a little bit more market insight with regards to that.
So it's the vast majority of it is manufactured in the U.S. In peak years, there's always import from both Canada and Mexico, even as far as Saudi Arabia occasionally, and that's usually for oil and gas or oil field markets. So in those years, which we could be entering right now, we haven't quite reached the Permian Basin demand that we saw a few years ago. But if that were to happen in those years, we tend to get about 10 to 15% coming out of out of Canada and Mexico. It can go a little bit higher depending on the volume required in that Permian Basin, really specifically. So, I don't imagine a lot of medium density is coming in, being imported. I don't know that for sure, but I'm speaking of from high density polyethylene. That's the figure that we've seen in previous years.
Okay. I've got another one. Does using more recycled polyethylene material increase the cost of production and therefore raise prices?
No, it would be the opposite. Basically, it's not necessarily opposite, but this is material that was produced as we achieved spec. So we're dialing in our production machines. So this is pipe that's not yet in spec as we start a machine, or if we're transitioning from color to color, going from black to orange or something like that. That material in transition isn't used or sold. So it's material that it's a necessary product to get pipe into spec, and we grind that up and pelletize and reuse that in our system. So it in theory it's slightly more work for that material, but otherwise we would be getting rid of it. There are certain markets where I believe manufacturers are utilizing certain plastics, post-consumer recycled plastics, HDPE, not necessarily from a pipe manufacturer, and introducing those. That's something that's still being investigated at the Plastic Pipe Institute. So hopefully, if that's a viable option, more manufacturers will do that for very specific markets, certainly never a pressure application. But for right now, we'd be using our own reprocessed material or potentially a small amount of material that was returned from the field that has been inspected, cleaned, and then reprocessed as well. So it's extra work, yes, but it shouldn't really affect the cost in an upward direction because we would have no other use for this pipe.
I've got kind of a follow-up to that question. Are you suggesting regrinding be, word this differently? You're not suggesting that regrind be put into the gas pipe, are you?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. I want to make sure that that's very clear.
I've got one final question, at least as it stands right now. What are the plants doing currently to increase production? Are they adding any new manufacturing units to keep up demand and continuing weather issues?
Mike, was that about pipe production or resin production, did it say?
It doesn't say. What are the plants doing? I guess we can maybe answer what you know to answer, but the question is, what are plants doing to increase production? I would assume the pipe production, but it didn't say.
Yeah, there's new capacity, plants coming online. We're increasing capacity where we're able to, certainly. Mark, I'm sure you know of a few that are increasing capacity around the U.S.
I would say let's start with us. I mean, for our certified gas resin, we've invested in wall monitors on multiple machines to allow us to produce pipe on more than one or two lines. We've introduced our barcoding system for printing barcodes on our pipe for the tracking traceability on multiple lines. I would assume other manufacturers and pipe extruders are doing the same. I know I could speak for us. As far as availability of feedstocks and raw materials, there's been talk. I believe it's a Shell facility in Pennsylvania that's been going on for years. I would think as far as additional capacity at this time, the resin producers themselves are just under the gun to stay as active as they can, keep the lines and the reactors that they have already in place running. We did learn last year that Sasol Chemicals stopped their U.S. Joint venture that they had with INEOS and sold off all the assets, and so it essentially just stopped, did not move forward with their plans to expand their facilities in the Gulf region. So that would be a negative impact, but again, INEOS picked up that capability that they did have in place. So I would think at this point in time, I think the chemical manufacturers, the resin producers are trying to continue operations as best as they could to get to that, again, that 90-day threshold of full out production. From a pipes extruder impact, again, speaking for ourselves, we are increasing our capabilities to allow us to make certified gas pipe wall monitors, barcode printers, and other quality assurance checks that would meet the specifications of a gas or municipal gas utility or a municipal gas utility.
What about resin?
Again, that's where I said last year Sasol sold their assets to INEOS and halted the polyethylene production plans for the United States. And with the perfect storm scenario, The resin producers themselves are just trying at this point, I believe, to maintain the levels that they're at and grow, get their current capacity up to 100%, which we all know is not the case. So I would not think that they're planning on increasing capacity in 2021. I did mention that there was a shell facility in Pennsylvania that has been under construction for quite some time. I believe that's probably within the next 5 years or so they're talking about that. But immediate demand or immediate influx of additional supply, no, not to my knowledge.
Okay, got it. I think that covers all of our questions. If we missed anyone's question for some reason, or if one occurs to you later on, make sure to let us know and we'll get the answer that you're looking for. There are multiple ways for you to reach out to us after the conference ends, and I'll go over that just a little bit more in a minute. I hope that everyone got some great information out of the session this afternoon. I would like to especially thank Mark and Logan for agreeing to join us today, and a great big thank you to everyone who joined us in attendance. Guys, any final thoughts you'd like to share before we finish up?
Thank you again to everybody and to EGW for putting all this together.
And again, thank you. We really appreciate being a part of this. We're here for if any follow-up questions that come across at a later date. Thank you again.
Well, thanks again, guys. We appreciate both of you coming in, sharing your insights with us. Just a reminder to the attendees that if you registered for this session and attended, you're already entered in the drawing for the door prize. And the winner, as I mentioned earlier, will be contacted via the information you provided us in your registration, so that you can get, we can get your shipping information and get your prize sent your way. We've created a special email address. It's events@egwusa.com. It's on the screen there. If you'd like to send us any additional questions via email, it's probably the best way to send your questions to us. We'll get those back to you just as quickly as possible. Of course, you can always reach us at our main line, 972-446-1655. We'll get you routed to the right person. If you have questions, also you can reach out to your EGW representative, your territory manager. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We certainly enjoyed spending the time with you today. We look forward to seeing you in the next session, which is going to be another general session, Solutions Through Collaboration, a case study. That begins at 2:30 Central Time. So take a few minutes and grab yourself a drink and a snack, and we'll see everyone back at 2:30. Don't forget to register for that session, though, if you haven't done so already. And I think that session will be really, really informative as well. Thank you guys again. We appreciate it.
Thank you.